welcome to No Boring Days. Today I'm going to talk about my UCI World Gravel Series Philippines edition in Bongabon, Nueva Ecija. But if you want to learn more about it, you can go to their Facebook page. I'll put it on the screen somewhere, and I'll also put it on the description in the YouTube. I had a lot of fun. It was super hard, and I managed to get 12th place in my age group category, which meant that I qualified for the UCI World Gravel Series, wherever it is going to be in the future. I did a quick post about it on my Instagram page a few days ago, but if you want to know more about my experience in this race, and I also have some race footage, then that's what you're going to get. Let's go. Let's talk about the start of the race. The beginning was really tricky. Not only did the participants have to deal with race jitters, but the terrain was difficult to begin with. The start of the race was at the bottom of a bridge. It was basically a riverbed, and it featured big rocks mixed with sand. And of course, the very beginning, you had to cross water that was almost a foot deep in certain sections. Then, you had to climb a little hill that if you chose the wrong line, you could get caught in the sand. Like I ended up putting my foot down and having to take a few steps just to get over that bit, like I chose the wrong line. Then we went on this long, flat section. It featured these really nice sandy off-road bit, but it also featured a pretty strong headwind, and I was hammering it. This was my first mistake of many. We're not even 5 minutes into the race and I'm already redlining. I was trying to reach the people in front, and eventually I figured that it would be good to wait till people came in front of me and I would just ride their wheel. But a lot of them were going really fast. So I kept riding wheels, and then a bunch of the wheels would disappear, and finally someone more my speed came around. This guy number 124 came along, and I just hung around him as we pedaled towards the climb. Now, eventually I realized that I got a flat tire. Now, this was the only mechanical of my race. I got a flat tire early. It was a blessing in a way because it forced me to stop and slow down. Like at this point, I was basically going all out and not really thinking about it. And this is also where my inexperience showed. I quickly looked at the tire, noticed a small leak. It seemed to me that it would eventually fix itself with the sealant, but I was low on air. So I fixed the flat with a CO2 cartridge. It was super fast. I think it took like a minute, right? But at some point during the race, I probably needed to add more CO2. But I decided, it's probably fine. So most of the race, I was running at this much pressure. Yep, that is the amount of pressure I had when I ended the race. So, and the other thing was, after the race, as I was cleaning up my stuff, I looked at the CO2 cartridge that I used, and it turned out that it still had a lot of CO2 in it. So it would have been really easy for me to stop again, check the CO2 cartridge, and just add more air. Again, live and learn. It's the first time I ever used the CO2 for the tires. To be honest, I think for the most part it was fine running it at that pressure. It seemed like I got a lot more traction in the off-road sections, although I did hit my rim many times. Fortunately, I looked at it after the race, and the rim seemed fine. These aluminum rims, man, they're made of they're indestructible. And I think I did really well at the off-road sections. In fact, that's where I think I was fast compared to the other participants. Now let's get to the climb. Before the race, we talked about this climb a lot. Like amongst ourselves with Sep and Mick, we would talk about it. And my thinking was I needed to get there early to avoid all the people rushing to the climb. Okay? And I did get there early, but in the end, I still pushed up the climb. Someone overtook me on the climb, which is fine, but shortly after overtaking, well, you'll see.
It's okay.
And then the most annoying thing about this was that, so after the guy went down, he was way faster than me pushing the bike up the climb. You can see him disappear up the climb as I was slowly pushing my bike up. Looking back, I feel like I shouldn't have worried about this climb too much. During the recon, Sep and I rode through the whole thing, and even though there was a lot of traffic up the climb,
Good morning.
I was able to ride through it, and this was the only part that I walked. I exerted a little more effort than I wanted to, though. But it was worth it because the downhill was one of the most fun parts of the race. It was kind of tricky because there were some turns, it was a little steep, and there were big rocks in the middle of the double track, which meant you really had to focus. But it was fun. Now, if you follow me on Instagram, I wrote about the Whitebeard Guy. I was cruising on the road when I heard a voice behind me, and he goes, "Basta surly, guapo." And I looked at him, and I'll be honest with you, he looked pretty old. I mean, he had a white beard, but I mean, he wasn't that much older than me, to be honest. But I looked at him, we had the same exact bike. He overtook me, and I thought I could probably keep up with this guy. And he kicked my ass. I hung to his wheel, right? And eventually it got more and more difficult. This guy was fast. We finally hit a dirt section, and I felt like I was more comfortable at the dirt than he was. So eventually I was able to overtake him and led through a small portion of the dirt section. And this is where I got a photo by Jilson Chu. Jilson is one of my fave photographers, and I was thrilled that he took a photo of me. I'm glad he caught me in my short stint in front of Whitebeard Guy. And after he posted that, and somehow through Instagram, I later learned that Whitebeard Guy's name is Anthony, and on Instagram he's at Racing Sucks. His bio reads, "Racing sucks, but I suck, so I race. I also build wheels, bikes, and my fitness." I did not stand a chance. Eventually, I ran out of gas, and Whitebeard Guy, Anthony, he disappeared into the distance. But he made such an impression on me that I wanted to tell him how fun it was to keep up with him. I saw him after the race, but he was going into his car, and I missed it. But I checked later on, and he finished 25th overall. So that guy was fast, and he was only like a age bracket higher than me. At this point, I started cramping. It was very early on in the race. I'm guessing it was around the 30-kilometer mark. At first, it wasn't too bad, but little did I know that this was just the start of a long day of cramping. So my first mistake was that I forgot to drink Bix electrolyte right before the race. Like during the race, I had Bix electrolytes inside my water bottles, but I should have drank before the race as well. And then my second mistake was that I was going way too hard. And Strava has a feature where you can see what zone people are in. Of course, this assumes they set it up correctly, but more or less, it's a good exercise to see how hard people were going. And according to my data, I spent an hour and 12 minutes in zone 4. And in fact, that's inaccurate because I was using a watch heart rate monitor, and then the watch sometimes isn't accurate. At the 20-kilometer mark, I adjusted the watch, and finally it gave me the correct heart data. So if you look at my heart data, in the first 20 kilometers, it was actually really low. But the truth was, I was pushing super hard. I was in zone 4 for a long time. Too long. So contrast that to the data that I was seeing from riders in the top 15, most of the riders were at zone 3, which is the zone I should have stayed in. I should have stayed in zone 3 and only occasionally hit zone 4. So I think this goes back to pace. I got a lot of tips from the comment sections on YouTube about racing at my own pace, and to be honest, I didn't fully understand what that meant. I think I do now. A little bit. I think I know a little bit more what that means now. This brings me to number 171. When I started feeling better again, like my legs were starting to feel pretty good, 171 came in front of me, gave me these hand signals that I did not understand, but I interpreted as, it's you and me and we are best friends. Right? So she took a turn in front and I was behind her, and eventually I took a turn in front. So it was really cool because there were so many kids shouting, "Hala, babae!" Like, hey, it's a girl. So many. We passed like a little town area, and so many kids were shouting that it was a girl, and they seemed amazed. It was a really cool reaction coming from the kids, and I could imagine that there were girl spectators who would see number 171 cycling really strong, and if she could do it, so can they. It's cool. It's always cool to see women in the sport of cycling, especially when they are strong and putting, and pulling little old me around. Like, I was behind her for a while. And in my defense, I did pull too, okay? But, I gotta keep a little bit of my manhood intact. So, here's where we passed Sep. I made a joke that he should get on the express train.
Time to get on the express train, bye.
And of course, shortly after passing him, I paid for that joke because I fell on one of the water crossings. Unfortunately, I don't have video of the actual fall, but I can tell you that a lot of people fell. In fact, all of us from Cebu fell off our bike. Mick may have had the worst fall because he actually went over the bars. Fortunately, he came out okay. My fall was the least damaging. If anything, it was like I took a quick dip into the river. So a lot of people fell. And I'm guessing that most of the falls happened in the slippery corners of the off-road sections. So participants would go at speed, they'd go straight, and then there would be a hard corner, like a hard left turn or a hard right turn. And they would take the hard turn, and then the wheels would slip right from under them. That's exactly how Sep crashed. He came out of it fine, just a scratched knee. I don't know if anyone was seriously injured, but it seemed that most of the injuries were scratches and road rash, so that's good. Shortly after I fell in the water, I started to cramp again.
Good. I'm starting to cramp.
And this was the worst of it. It hurt a lot. I could barely keep my legs spinning.
Crazy cramps on my thighs. Wonderful.
I tried to stretch it on the bike when it was happening. I tried to keep my legs moving, but it was hard. At this point, I felt like my race was over. I was just suffering, man. Like, my morale was low. I was feeling sorry for myself. I was questioning why I was even in the race. I didn't want to bike again in my entire life. I was thinking of stopping at the 65-kilometer mark. But, the cramps, they just disappear and I'd start feeling good again. Then I'd get to push again. And then the cramps would come back again. And then they'd disappear, and then I get to push again. So it was like that for a while. And then I hit the 65-kilometer mark. I didn't realize there would be an aid station in the 65-kilometer mark, and this helped a lot. If they weren't there, I would have needed to figure out my water situation, and I was coming from a low point.
Yeah. 20, last 20. I'm cramping all over.
Cramping.
Oh man, yeah, crazy.
You need to get some banana.
This one, water? Yeah, no, it's okay. I won't use that. All right.
How about banana?
I think this will be fine.
Okay, go.
Okay.
You know, the aid station forced me to stop, perked me up a lot, gave me energy and water. Even got some of that Black Mamba drink. And it reminded me that I was only 20 kilometers away from finishing the race. Roughly an hour more of riding. I could do this. I could do this. That is what I thought. Last 20 kilometers. But to give you an idea of what the last 20K was, there was a road section through the city. Then it was another beautiful section of open farmland and a lot of headwind. Lots and lots of headwind. And when I finally got used to the headwind, the other feature of the Bongabon course that was there a lot that I haven't talked about yet was the irrigation road. So while dealing with the headwind, eventually we were dealing with headwind and irrigation roads. Now, let me explain the irrigation roads a little bit. So this is something I believe that is unique to Bongabon. So these are roads where water would pass through, and it would be like deep water, like I don't know, like almost a foot deep. And I saw these roads in the track reads of some vloggers, but they didn't really explain what was underneath the roads, right? You just saw like maybe a foot, maybe half a foot deep of water, and they're just biking through it. But some of the roads were hard packed with mud, right? So it wasn't that muddy, like you could still bike through it. But most of the irrigation roads had smooth pebbles under the water. Some really small, but some pretty big. I'm guessing about as big as my fist. So they were really tricky to pass through. Like, you got a lot of resistance while you were biking through them. And at this point, the wet lube on the drivetrain, it can only take so much water. From the very beginning of the race to the end of the race, you're passing through water. Like a lot of water. So the last 20 minutes of my ride featured weird noises every time I pushed on the pedals. And I was legitimately worried about my bike. But seems like it was okay. At some point in the last 20K, I was feeling pretty good. I overtook a bunch of people. I was feeling really happy.
Thank you.
It's amazing how much energy you get when you overtake somebody. And then this section happened. I overshot the corner. I stopped pedaling. And suddenly I was attacked by cramps all over my legs. I stopped for a long time. And then I looked at the trail that I was supposed to go to. And everybody that I passed in the dirt section before that area, I saw them all again as they overtook me when I was struggling with my cramps. Felt bad, man. Felt bad. But the last part featured roads that I love. I believe the last 10K featured stuff like slightly technical flowing off-road sections. So when the cramps subsided, I flew through those roads, man. It felt so good. Then finally, I hit the finish, and it was fun. Super fun. Great event. Super well organized. Met a lot of cool people. I'm so happy I did it. Shout out to Cycle Meeting for the tires, the tire plugs, and the lube. They were a huge help. And they are one of the best online bike shops in the business. Give them a look. I'll put their Facebook page on the description. Also, shout out to Focus Recovery PH. They provided me with the Bix Recovery and Bix electrolytes. I took the Bix Recovery after the race. Also, big thanks to Sep and Mick. They made the whole experience better. It was good to have fellow Cebuanos along to share it with. And I can't wait for the next one. Bongabon, I will be back.
What the hell?